What up, world? You already know what time it is. So, boy, Mac Miz, the host of the most. Don't need to brag, no boast. All I do is give a toast to the real folks who done paved the way in the real way for us players to play. Now, listen, man, they really finna start some bullshit out here, man. This ain't no game, man. But the question is propaganda spreading faster than the virus? Because on one hand, you got a virus that the recovery rate is 99.9 effective. On the other hand, it keeps mutating because it's adapting to the vaccines that it's receiving to make it less potent, as they say. So it's basically a living organism that's mutating and adapting to its host. So that shit right there lets you know that the vaccines are not really doing much. And if they are, for how long? And who stands to gain from vaccinating the whole population? You know what I mean? It's poison. It's all poison, you know. We gotta keep it real with ourselves, man. Are we willing to be poisoned, or are we just gonna use our wits about us and realize the situation that we're in? Because in a minute, you're about to pull out the concentration camps, and compliance is not the same thing as coercion. You dig it? Well, listen to this.
Breaking news. New York legislation provides for indefinite detention of unvaccinated at governor's whim. In the next legislative session beginning January 5, 2022, the New York Senate and Assembly could vote on a bill that would grant permissions to remove and detain cases, contacts, carriers, or anyone suspected of presenting a significant threat to public health and remove them from public life on an indefinite basis. Bill A-416 presents a serious risk to the basic liberties of all Americans in the state of New York, including their right to choose whether or not to receive medical treatment and vaccinations related to thus far undetermined contagious diseases. The bill gives the governor of New York, his or her delegates, including but not limited to the commissioner and heads of local health departments, the right to remove and detain any individuals or groups of people through issuing a single order. The orders only have to include the individual's names or reasonably specific descriptions of the individuals or groups. The department can decide to hold a person or group of people in a medical facility or any other appropriate.
That was good.
Purposefully vague.
Yeah, my bad. I'm on the road still, you know.
That no one shall be held for
I'm about to come off the road right now, so it's all good.
Court orders to waive this maximum detention.
Well, listen to this though.
After 60 days,
are you hearing it?
Yeah, a little bit.
It goes on to state that the bill will require an individual who has been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate prescribed course of treatment, preventive medication, or vaccination, essentially giving the government the right to detain anyone they want and forcibly vaccinate them. As the language of the bill refers to individuals or groups who potentially pose a threat, the bill is a preemptive strike against anyone that the department believes has the capacity to pose a threat in the future, such as those refusing to receive the COVID-19 vaccination. There is no explicit reference to what types of contagious diseases qualify a person to be removed from public life, detained in a facility, and forced into medical treatment and vaccination. Anyone can technically be held in isolation until they are deemed non-contagious, which would also raise questions over whether those carrying HIV/AIDS could be released back into society. The bill has received an overwhelmingly negative response on the New York Senate website. Commenters have stated that this is disturbing and sets up a terrible precedent for future law. The governor can basically detain whoever she likes on the basis of scanty evidence. This is un-American. It reminiscent of the Soviet Union locking up political opponents on the basis that they were mentally unstable. We cannot allow this in our state. This is a violation of fundamental human rights. The government should be working for the people, not locking them up without cause.
Right.
Others have noted the similarities between this bill and the Australian response to COVID-19. Australia has built a number of COVID quarantine facilities that can hold thousands of people at any given time. The language of Bill A416 can guarantee that Americans, whether they test positive for COVID or any other diseases, are held indefinitely at such facilities. Assembly Bill A416 relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases who are potentially dangerous to the public health. As reported, Marjorie Taylor Greene falsely claims New York passed bill to forcibly vaccinate.
Mon nom est Karine Banas, je suis actrice depuis l'âge de 9 ans.
Vaccinate people. New York legislators could pass a bill that allows unvaccinated individuals to be detained or forcibly inoculated, but it hasn't passed either of the chambers, as Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene claimed. Speaking at America Fest on Sunday, Greene told attendees that the New York House passed a bill that allows for unvaccinated people deemed a danger to society could be detained. Greene said the government would have a hell of a time if they want to hold me down and give me a vaccine, and received cheers and applause when she announced she was unvaccinated. Things are getting to a place where they shouldn't be, Greene said. When asked for comment about Greene's claim that New York passed a bill that allowed for unvaccinated people to be detained, Nick Dyer, a spokesperson for Greene, sent Newsweek a tweet from the legislator that linked to a National Post story about Bill A416. Assemblymember N. Nick Perry introduced the bill at the beginning of the year, and Greene is correct that it would allow the governor or their delegee to detain people who are deemed to pose an imminent and significant threat to public health. However, she's incorrect that it passed any chamber of the New York legislature. The bill is still being held in committee and has not had a vote in the Assembly or the state Senate. If a person needs to be detained more than 3 business days and requests release, the governor or their delegee must ask for a court order authorizing a longer detention. Absent a court order, a person cannot be detained more than 5 days after their request for release. People cannot be held for more than 60 days without a court order, according to the bill. However, it leaves open the possibility of the government requesting additional court orders to extend the detention period. To be considered for detention, a person must be a confirmed case, close contact, carrier, or suspected case of a contagious disease threat. People may not be detained after the department determines they're no longer contagious. The bill also grants the governor or their delegee power to issue and seek enforcement of other orders that they determine are necessary to prevent dissemination or transmission of contagious diseases or other illnesses. This includes requiring people who are exposed or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate, prescribed course of treatment, preventative medication, or vaccination. This is the 4th time Perry's introduced legislation that would allow the government to detain people who pose a threat to public health. In a statement in January, he said the bill was originally introduced to address public health concerns when Ebola was spreading. He said he believes the Constitution is sacred and there was no intent or plan to take away or violate liberties Americans are entitled to under our Constitution. I am convinced that most smart Americans, faced with the deadly consequences of having a person who is a carrier of a very deadly virus roaming freely through any community, would support public action to contain such a person from contaminating and potentially bringing certain death to persons they have contact with, Perry said. The legislator noted that the bill hasn't been pushed for passage because Ebola is no longer a threat. However, He said a deadly pandemic is still a real threat and there may be a need in the future to protect people from those carrying a very deadly and transmissible virus. The bill garnered significant attention earlier in the year as people homed in on it as an authoritarian conspiracy. Perry said he received threats over it, telling Politico he thought he would need Secret Service protection. Many have commented on the legislation that they oppose the measure, with one person saying it was going a little too far even though they support vaccines and mask wearing. Some called it barbaric, tyrannical, and anti-American, and some commented that they would move if it passed. It's unclear where Green got her information that it already passed the Assembly and was headed to the state Senate for a vote.
LabRec TV breaking news.
You know something? Hey, have you guys heard of String Boss? It's a new IPTV provider that gives you over 5,000 channels for only $20 a month. $20 for live TV, local TV.
So there you have it. They on it. They on it. You know, there's concentration camps right here in Canada. You know. Well, is it more propaganda than actual fact? Because this is just a bill that they wanted to push in New York, you know? But I feel like the propaganda is making them, whatever the public takes to is making them, you know, as they go along, they plan out their structure, you know, or how they're going to go about doing it. So they use the propaganda to see the public's reaction, and they move accordingly.
The propaganda is just like they're putting out.
So the propaganda machine has a lot to do with it.
Yep, for sure.
And that's what happened. But did you ever hear of the bubonic plague?
Which one?
The bubonic plague.
Yeah, I heard that name. I'm not too familiar with it though. I definitely heard it before though.
Hold up.
The Black Death surged unstoppably throughout Eurasia for years, killing people in painful, excruciating ways within days of infection. Almost no one who caught it stood a chance. By the time it was done,
This was in Europe in the 14th century. Listen.
Deadly, widespread contagion finally ended. Europe in 1347. Famines, tuberculosis, smallpox, beheadings, STDs. Old age seemed like the least common way for anyone to die at the time. Even giving birth gave you good odds of ending up in the grave. In this time of generally widespread disease and danger, no one could have imagined a plague which would undo all the other plagues thus far and was about to make its horrific entrance. Of course, Europeans had heard of the Great Pestilence that was spreading through the Middle East and Asia. However, in a situation that thankfully would never be repeated again, they just kept going about their business hoping the problem would fix itself before really affecting them. And yet, one day, undeterred by state lines, the bubonic plague made its European debut. 12 ships from the Black Sea docked in the sunny Sicilian port of Messina, and people working on the docks went to greet the sailors and get the cargo. That's when they noticed something odd. Most of the sailors were dead, and the few who remained alive were covered in disgusting black boils, hemorrhaging blood and pus. No one knew exactly what was going on, but getting all the ships and boil-covered sailors as far away from the scene as possible seemed like a good call, to where they didn't really care. Sicilian authorities told the death ships to leave the port. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Not only was the bubonic plague one of the most virulent, contagious diseases known to man, and thus had probably already spread to some dock workers in the brief contact they had with the sailors, the flea-ridden rats that had originally infected the sailors had already abandoned the ship.
Listen to this shit.
Right into the cobblestone streets of the sea.
Rats came
the plague spread through Italy,
because of the
What?
bubonic plague.
even London within the year. Even in the time of such slow, arduous travel, the Black Death tore its way through the continent with unimaginable force and speed. Between 1346 and 1353, the Black Death killed a higher proportion of the world population than any other singular event in history. It killed 25 million people in Europe in a period of 4 years, and over this climax of its spread is estimated to have destroyed 75 million lives worldwide. Keep in mind, this was during a time when the entire global population was estimated to be around 380 million. Some estimates even put the plague's total death toll higher, at around 200 million, and global population estimates higher as well. However, even the minimum death count is horrifying to comprehend. It took 200 years for the world to rebuild its population to pre-plague levels. We assume part of the reason for the lengthy repopulating process was that seeing boil-covered humans and death all around you for years is bound to have an effect on your sex drive. But for the world population to bounce back, that meant the Black Plague had to end. So how did it? Did it just run its course, or did people start getting better at stopping the spread and fighting it? The answer is actually nuanced, as is most scientific and medical issues, despite what your self-diagnosis with WebMD might tell you. Many experts have an explanation they favor most, but they also agree that the Black Plague ended as a result of a combination of factors. First of all, the extreme deadliness of the Black Plague proved to be part of its eventual undoing. The disease killed so many people so quickly that at some point it ran of victims. When the bubonic plague struck a person, they quickly fell grievously ill. Symptoms included fevers of 100 to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, nausea, vomiting, severe joint pain, and headaches. The most unique symptoms of the plague were buboes, that gave it its name, large egg-shaped boils that oozed pus and blood. Charming. People who usually fell ill became confined to their homes and died within 3 to 8 days. Over 80% of all those infected died. Thus, the odds once you caught the disease were not great. This is why highly deadly pathogens have a way of wiping themselves out. A disease that kills so many so fast eventually reduces its own chance of spreading and therefore surviving. At some point, there were literally just not many people left to kill, and not that dense a population to work through. Eventually, when people wised up to the fact that staying away from the sick would help them survive. See, the second reason the plague ended was because people started trying to prevent its transmission. Doctors initially had no good advice to give the population. This was a previously unknown disease, and also most doctors at the time thought that leeches helped depression. Unless Gwyneth Paltrow is your medical professional, we generally expect better medical advice and treatment these days. For an example of doctors' opinions about the disease during that era, one plague doctor stated his belief that instantaneous death occurs when the aerial spirit escaping from the eyes of the sick man strikes the healthy person standing near and looking at the sick. He wasn't exactly wrong about the ease of transmission and the fact that the bubonic plague could be spread via the air, but his reasoning as to how and why was suspect. However, despite the horrific state of medicine at the time, people eventually realized that the more they came into contact with others, the more likely they would be to catch this deadly new disease. So people started escaping the big dense cities of Europe and going to the countryside. However, the plague, carried by fleas on rats and livestock, followed them out there as well. So more stringent measures were taken. Store owners closed up shops and stayed home. Priests wouldn't administer last rites. Doctors refused to see patients. And given our previous statements, this was probably for the best. And cremation became extremely popular in order to both minimize the existence of plague-carrying bodies and also save space as corpses quickly filled up mass graves. Tragically, people were even forced to leave their sick and suffering family members behind to have a shot at escaping the plague. Thomas Malkaitis, a history professor at DePaul University, explains that people had no real understanding of how to fight it other than trying to avoid sick people. That's why in Italy, where the disease had first infected Europe, they decided to start a new practice. In the Venetian-controlled port city of Ragusa, incoming sailors were kept on their ships in isolation for 30 days. Eventually, the isolation period increased to 40 days, which in Italian was called quarantino. This led to the origin of our current word that we've become way too depressingly familiar with, quarantine. The practice worked, as incoming cases of bubonic plague were greatly reduced. Even with quarantine procedures, however, what was to be done about the fleas and rats transmitting the disease? These two animals still carry the bacteria, known as Yersinia Yersinia pestis that spread the plague. Well, most European cities decided that greatly improving their sanitation procedures would help in this regard, as it does in most regards, actually. It turns out that the cleaner a place is, the less fleas and rats tend to congregate there, as most students discover after freshman year in their college dorms. People also strive to improve their personal hygiene, which helped to keep even more fleas at bay. Again, we're unsure why this wasn't a thing before, but apparently people learning to wash their hair more than once a month was the tiniest of silver linings to the horrific mass death of the plague. So the deadliness of the plague itself, combined with quarantine procedures and better sanitation, helped curb the spread of the Black Death. What was the final factor that helped put a stop to it? In 2010, researchers collected DNA from mass graves of Black Plague victims and found that the DNA of the bacteria was vastly different from the current form of the plague. It was a far deadlier strain of the disease. As we said before, highly fatal pathogens must eventually find a way to be less deadly in order to keep their own reproduction going. So the evolution of bacterial DNA helped lessen the deadliness of the bacteria. But that's not the only way DNA transformation helped stop the plague. It turns out human DNA mutations also helped it lose momentum. Apparently, a certain DNA mutation that has been shown to help protect against HIV in humans today first appeared in a widespread way in the population in the 1300s. The most likely reason, a widespread fatal epidemic. The disease didn't cause the mutation. It simply disproportionately affected those without it, leading more of those with the mutation to pass down their genes. A combination of all these factors stopped the plague in its tracks. Unfortunately, people at the time also tried to end the Black Death in several ill-advised and horrifying ways. Many believed the plague was in fact God punishing the population for their sins. Therefore, they would have to demonstrate repentance and devotion to God in order to escape the curse. For some reason, some believed the best way to do this was to hunt down and kill anyone they deemed sinful or heretic. When these people asked themselves,
Wow.
what would Jesus do? Their answer apparently was massacre large groups of people, especially Jewish populations, demonstrating that they clearly missed the entire point of their religion. Other less terrifying but equally ineffective remedies involved doctors telling plague patients to bathe in rose water or vinegar to help cleanse the disease out. This worked about as well as anyone would expect, which is to say, not at all. Turns out rose water does little to stop bacteria with an 80% kill rate. Though the Black Death peaked in the years of 1346 and 1353, it by no means went away after that. Smaller outbreaks would resurge for hundreds of years, with the last notable one being the Great Plague of London in 1665. Some believe the Great Fire of London in 1666 helped put a stop to the disease's spread, as it burned many of the rats and fleas carrying it. But most historians and medical experts dispute that story. However, this last big iteration of the disease did inspire the well-known children's nursery rhyme, Ring a Ring of Roses. Londoners thought holding a posy of flowers up to their nose would help protect them from the plague. This explains the lyric Pocket Full of Posies. A tissue, we all fell down refers to people falling ill and needing tissues and then dropping dead. The original lyrics, in fact, were We all fall down dead. In case you needed further proof that the original versions of children's stories and rhymes were all deranged. Today, the bacteria that caused the Black Death still exists, but it's now treatable with antibiotics. About 7 cases of bubonic plague are reported in the U.S. every year, and around 1,000 to 3,000 worldwide, mostly on the African continent, meaning you have a higher chance of dying by a lightning strike than the plague these days. And now that we know how the Black Death ended, and we never have to worry about a pandemic tearing through the world again, why not click on this funny video, or this one right here.
Good morning, I'm Lucille Ball.
I sure know that. Roll sound and action.
You see how they talk about
Pompeii, buried by Mount Vesuvius.
the bubonic plague was the last pandemic, and I
Yeah.
hope another one doesn't tear through the world. Well, look, we got the new one that's coming through, but people are not dying as
fast because we're a little bit more healthier nowadays and
we're more advanced
more
technology
knowledge
wise.
to cope with things.
So that goes to show right there.
It's a new world.
The world is showing you that history repeats itself.
Right.
You know? But at the same time, they throw out a lot of lies and bullshit to make it repeat itself, you know? But we got to see how far this shit goes, man, you know? Because this new Omicron virus, first it went to the Delta, now it went to Omicron.
Right. You see how they switching it up on us, eh?
And now they shut down our city once again, you know?
Do you know what the rules
Now
are?
these restaurants are not going to get much customers, you know?
There's gonna be another
A lot of people are going to be out of work.
yeah. Woo, it's gonna be hectic, man.
Just that goes to show, man. If we're not ready for it, we better get ready.
Oh man.
Shit is going to hit like a ton of bricks.
Right.
Well, my thing is, like, why are they using all these fear tactics and all this fear mongering? You know?
Well, they wanna, that's what they want. They wanna sell people fear.
But they want their economy to flourish as well, you know? Why not come up off some of those millions of dollars that you guys have, billions, and spread the wealth? You know what I mean?
Right.
You guys already know that there's certain things that need to be rectified and certain things they need to answer for. You know?
No, that's a fact. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like they're gonna do their best to avoid, and
Right.
if we're lucky, they might throw some money in our faces just to throw us off a little bit. Be like, the world's messing up. All right, let's throw some money up, see what happens, distract the people a little bit, and then we'll come back to terms afterwards while we figure it out. But in the meantime, give everybody some more, what they call it, serve money,
Yeah, curb money.
curve money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what they call it, the curb money, you know?
Nope.
Like, you know what I'm saying? People are some hoes on the curb, like, hey, take this hair curb money.
Oh wow,
Shut the fuck up.
that's how they doing us, eh?
While we create this, you know, we create this crazy atmosphere. Like, how far is it really gonna go? You know?
Right.
And now, if they go up to, let's say they go up to their sixth, seventh vaccine, right? And you never took the vaccine, do you take that seventh as your first one, or do you have to take all the other vaccines to reach to your seventh?
How many vaccines are there so far? There's three.
Or It's number 3 right now.
Yeah, number 3, right?
You see what they're trying to do? Pass a bill in New York. The quarantine motherfuckers that ain't got a vaccine.
Right.
You know, they're saying, "Oh, you're hurting your family. You're doing this. You're doing that because you ain't got the vaccine." You know, it's crazy how they're doing us, man. Creating a war, creating a rift in our own families. You know,
Mm-hmm.
some of us got people that have it, some that don't. You know, and it's like people are going back and forth. They're like, don't nobody want know what to believe. You know? Like, what's the consensus? You know.
No, it doesn't make any sense, man.
Well, we all know that we know the truth that they wanted to for it to get to this level. You know,
Right.
like we seen it coming, but I feel like you know when they say resistance is futile, why did if we seen it coming, why did we just let it go? Let it happen. You know? But that's because the whole world had no choice, right? They did it in such a way where it's like you have no choice. Oh, you want to keep your job? Or you want to go? You want to go places? Or you want to move around?
Here, get vaccinated.
So it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
No, that's a fact. I mean, just think about it. Look at all the people that got vaccinated right now that can't work because they're closed, or you know what I mean? Like, it's.
Say what? I can't hear you.
I said, think about all the people that got vaccinated and
Right,
now they can't even work because their place of business shut down.
right.
So it's like they're forcing people to do things and then they're calling an audible on the play. Like, what's the play?
Like,
Like,
hold up. Y'all gotta shut down again.
yeah,
The job didn't work. So,
everything.
thanks for trying, though. Thanks for trying.
You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck?
Give you brownie points for trying, you know? You're a concerned citizen. How come we can't make a citizen's arrest on these politicians? Let's go snatch them up.
Right, full of shit.
Well, that would be a violation of their rights. And they're violating our rights every single day. Passing legislation and doing all this bullshit. Because of what? Science?
Mm-hmm.
So y'all just believe science because the scientist told you.
Right.
So that means common sense don't make no sense no more. Everything science says.
Common sense ain't so common no more.
Be like, knowledge born. What the science, baby?
Right.
Because it doesn't make any sense. How do they know that this next vaccine is not going to work too? How did they know that this new variant is not going to mutate into something different? Or they can't even use a vaccine? Or the vaccine is the host that keeps the virus alive, you know?
Oh, there's so much things that could play off of this. It's not even funny. That's why you can't really trust
You know what I'm saying? First they call it the coronavirus. Now it's the Omicron, the Delta, then the Delta Omicron. Which means media control. When you switch the letters around. So we got to think about how far this propaganda train has taken us. Huh?
Right.
Or how far we gonna let it go? This shit is deep. Man. You ain't got time to play around with these suckers out here. You know, these paper pushing punks, pushing legislation that don't even have nothing to do with the real reality of things. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like they think that just by having a piece of paper and having a little, what should we say? Uh,
I noticed.
democracy, hypocrisy, bureaucracy, that they could just pull the world over everyone's eyes. You know, I think it's all fine and dandy. I mean, they know what they're doing. We know what they're doing, and they're looking at it like, well, don't matter what we're doing because you ain't got the muscle to stop us. How about that? The greatest muscle is the mind. So I'm like, my mind's telling me I ain't with none of this bullshit. A lot of people's minds are telling them that too. So once we put our minds together, we're gonna see the solution to this shit.
Right.
It's the people. We gotta change the system of white supremacy and the system of justice. Because right now they got us in a cobra clutch. They think that we need them. They think we're dependent on them. They think we can't learn something new or strive to be nothing better without the system that's that's kept alive to marginalize us, you know, and it's crumbling before our eyes, like because how far are they gonna go with the bullshit, you know? There's only so far you can go with the bullshit before people start realizing, hey, because you notice now people are not like, oh, why you ain't taking the vaccine? Why you ain't taking it?
Right.
You're fucking up my life. You know? They're not saying that to other people, you know?
Nah, I mean, slowly but surely, people are getting a little
People
more.
are like, yo, what the hell? I gotta take another vaccine?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're saying, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Hold up. Something's up. When we broke the science to y'all about a year and a half ago, we're
Right.
giving y'all the game about this shit, man. You know what I'm saying?
Now that everything's coming to
Why wouldn't when the virus was hitting China so hard, they kept everything open, man. What they thought it wouldn't affect them, it's only happening in China. They kept doing business with Italy. It's because China is so self sufficient, but you have to do business with them if you want to flourish. So they had to, and they always want to know what's going on in China. They got spies and everything down there, but they can't duplicate what they did in terms of building a hospital and just eradicating the whole thing out
right.
of their living. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like they built the Great Wall of China for a reason. You know what I'm saying? One of the greatest architectural structures to date. You know, so let's get ourselves into learning, knowing who they fought, knowing the wars. We got to delve into all types of history to see where these plagues come from, how these plagues came about, and how we could just get away from that shit. But I feel like it's a complex situation, but the solution is going to be very
Straightforward.
simple. Simple, yeah,
Yep.
as soon as we see it. You feel me?
No, that's a fact. It's gonna be hard to deny it.
So no more plausible deniability. You know what I'm saying? We all know that shit is fucked up. They're trying us. And they won't stop until everybody's vaccinated and damn near controlled, or even like, you never know what these vaccines are doing. Maybe they are hooked up to the 5G towers, and we over here overlooking that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Like we don't know. We have yet to find out.
Yep. Well, I'm just gonna leave y'all with this last little bit on propaganda. Just so y'all could understand where I'm coming from. The media will do whatever it has to create whatever narrative it wants. Can you dig it? Enjoy.
À l'aventure et inspirez vos fêtes avec le Kia Seltos. Kia, du mouvement vient l'inspiration.
Clickbait, misinformation, so-called fake news. If 2020 felt a bit like a propaganda nightmare, it's nothing compared to the terrifying power of Hitler's propaganda machine. Carefully orchestrated propaganda campaigns allowed Hitler and the Nazis to sow hatred, encourage violence, and get away with unimaginable atrocities. Life in Germany after the First World War was bleak. After losing the war and being made to sign the harsh Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to relinquish huge amounts of territory, and the country fell into a deep recession. Unemployment was sky high, and inflation was running rampant. In 1914, before the war, a loaf of bread cost the equivalent of 13 cents. By the end of the war, in 1919, the cost had doubled to 26 cents. By 1922, 3 years after the war had ended, a loaf of bread cost $700. But things would get so much worse in the post-war years. By the end of 1923, the price of bread had skyrocketed to the equivalent of $100 billion. The economy had collapsed, and the German currency had become worthless. Unable to feed their families or make ends meet, morale among the German population plummeted. This astounding reversal of fortunes for the once mighty nation created the perfect conditions for the Nazis to rise to power. The National Socialist Party, or the Nazis, came to power in 1933, and Hitler wasted no time in implementing his devious plans to restore Germany to its former glory. Over the next few years, he began to rebuild the German military in direct violation of the Versailles Treaty, attempted to boost morale by praising the German people as a superior race, and blamed all of Germany's problems on so-called traitors like communists, Jews, and other minorities. In 1939, with the invasion of Poland, Hitler launched the Second World War and implemented his brutal final solution to what he called the Jewish problem. It was estimated that 5 to 6 million Jews, up to 2/3 of all Jews living in Europe before the war, were starved, tortured, used as slave labor, and systematically murdered in Nazi death camps like Auschwitz during the Holocaust. How was Hitler able to get away with such unimaginable atrocities? The truth is that none of it would have been possible without Hitler's propaganda machine. Within weeks of the Nazis taking power, Hitler established the Ministry for Popular Enlightenment and Propaganda to spread National Socialist ideas. And he was very clear about the ministry's purpose. In 1924, Hitler was quoted as saying that propaganda's task is not to make an objective study of the truth insofar as it favors the enemy and then set it before the masses with academic fairness. Its task is to serve our own right, always and unflinchingly. At the head of this all-important ministry was a man named Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels was a gifted speaker and a talented propagandist. Joseph Goebbels. He wanted to be the man largely responsible for the German people's favorable opinion of the Nazi regime. The Nazis' propaganda campaigns were so successful because they targeted the weaknesses and aspirations of different classes of Germans. Under Goebbels' direction, the ministry crafted unique messages for different audiences and used advanced advertising techniques for the day to spread their nefarious ideas throughout German society. The military rearmament campaign was a clear violation of the Versailles Treaty, but also created many jobs in a struggling economy and helped the Nazis secure the support of the working classes. Messages targeting business owners who had suffered after the war placed the blame for all of Germany's recent troubles on communists and Jews, and claimed that Germany had been stabbed in the back and betrayed by foreign aggressors after World War I. The key themes of propaganda targeting the middle and upper classes focused on the supposed purity and racial supremacy of the German people. Nazi propaganda infiltrated all areas of German life, from education and industry to science and entertainment, and the ministry used all forms of media to spread their messages and present Germany as the defender of Western culture. Art and radio and music and film and theater were all harnessed to further the Nazis' agenda. Everything from the Nazis' uniforms to the party's strict hierarchy echoed a strong military theme and appealed to Germans who wanted to regain the country's former glory as a military power. War was glorified as a way for the Germans to avenge themselves against their enemies, and a propaganda campaign rebranded the post-war years as part of a 30 Years' War, one that started in 1914 with the onset of World War I, and one that wouldn't end until Germany was victorious and restored to its former glory. Painted in this light, the Nazis were able to convince the German public that their enemies were planning to attack them at any moment, and the Nazis were able to claim that the invasion of Poland at the start of World War II was simply an act of self-defense. This militaristic theme was on prominent display during the many rallies held by Hitler. Nazi Party rallies were held annually in Nuremberg to display the power and might of the Nazi regime and gain popular support for the party, often lasting for more than a week. Thousands of spectators would flood the fairgrounds to attend folk festivals and watch parades of specially selected SS and military troops who best represented the Aryan ideal as they marched through the grounds, turning to Hitler, who was situated at the very top top of the massive grandstands to recognize him with the signature Nazi salute. The Nazis knew that it wasn't enough to convince the adult Germans to follow them. They had to target the next generation of Germans and turn them into devoted Nazis too. In 1937, Hitler outlawed the Boy Scouts and all other youth groups except for his own version, the Hitler Youth. Under the guise of typical scouting activities like hiking, camping, and survival training, the Hitler Youth was a way for the Nazis to remove children from the influence of their parents and indoctrinate them into their anti-Semitic ideology. The program was so effective that many children would denounce their parents or even report them for behaving in ways the Nazis considered unacceptable, such as being tolerant towards Jews. The real goal of the Hitler Youth, though, was to create more soldiers for the German army, and over time, the boys' branch of the group became more and more militaristic, training young boys to march, handle weapons, and prepare for war. The Nazis had complete power over German newspapers and were able to control what news the German people read. They used newspapers like Die Stürmer, the Attacker, to further their anti-Semitic agenda, especially in periods prior to the passage of anti-Semitic legislation. Before the 1935 Nuremberg race laws were enacted, the Nazis used newspapers extensively to gain acceptance or at least tolerance of their new racist policies. Under the new laws, anyone with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents, regardless of whether they were practicing Judaism or self-identified with their Jewish roots, were excluded from citizenship, denied political rights, and forbidden from marrying anyone of German blood. Graphic cartoons in Die Stürmer portrayed Jews as hideous and frightening subhuman enemies of the German people, obsessed with money, sex, and power. The Nazis were portrayed as simply stepping in to restore order, and the German people were encouraged to stand aside and passively accept their horrible treatment of Jews. One of the Nazis' greatest propaganda weapons was the film industry. The Nazis were suspicious at first, since they thought that the film industry was controlled by Jews, but Goebbels saw the opportunity to influence the thoughts and beliefs of the German people through film. He purged the industry of undesirables and offered high-profile positions and unlimited resources to those who were loyal to the Nazi cause. Some films focused on depicting Germans as racially, culturally, and militarily superior and glorified the Nazi party. One of Goebbels' favorite directors was Leni Riefenstahl, and she directed many films for the Nazis, including Triumph of the Will, an aesthetically pleasing film covering the 1934 Nazi Party rally. Other films had a darker theme. The Eternal Jew, directed by Fritz Hitler, demonized the Jewish people as subhuman, wandering cultural parasites who were bent on destroying German culture. In the years leading up to the start of World War II, the Nazis were making little effort to hide their violations of the Versailles Treaty and were being incredibly blatant about their horrific ideas and plans. So why did no one stop them? In short, the propaganda machine was working just as hard outside of Germany as it was within the country. In the days before the internet, it was much easier for governments
Something to think about, huh?
and take charge of what outsiders were allowed to see about the inner workings of their country. They took steps to mislead foreign
Was it
governments,
propaganda?
thinking the Nazis were simply making reasonable demands to
Was it?
rebuild their country, while downplaying their anti-Semitic rhetoric and increasingly violent treatment of Jews. Just 3 years before the onset of World War II, Nazi Germany hosted the 1936 Olympic Games, inviting the world into their country in the midst of their remilitarization and anti-Semitism. This event was yet another grand propaganda campaign designed to fool the world and bolster the German people. Though Jewish German athletes were forbidden to compete in the Games, the Nazis toned down their anti-Semitic rhetoric in the papers and radio, and they cleaned up their cities, removing Jews on welcome signs and blatantly racist posters. Visiting athletes and delegates were blissfully unaware of the true extent of the Nazis' hatred for the Jews and their increasingly violent treatment of them. Beloved Nazi film director Leni Riefenstahl filmed the entire event for use as pro-German and pro-Nazi propaganda in the months and years to come, showcasing the Nazis as heroic leaders who had turned their country around and had shown the world how superior the German people were. Later, as World War II dragged on, the world finally began hearing whispered rumors of the atrocities being committed in Nazi concentration camps. The propaganda machine once again went to work to quash these reports. The Nazis went so far as to allow the International Red Cross to visit one of these camp ghettos, inviting representatives to tour the Theresienstadt camp in modern Czech Republic. There, Red Cross officials saw a respectable, if crowded, ghetto where Jewish residents were treated benevolently, fed adequately, and put to work under humane conditions. The Nazis even made a film about the camp to reassure the German public that nothing sinister was going on. But it was all lies. In reality, the camp had undergone an extensive beautification campaign prior to the visit, and as soon as filming was over, the cast, aka the prisoners, were rounded up and shipped off to the notorious Auschwitz death camp for extermination. Thankfully, in the end, the Nazis lost World War II, and both Hitler and Goebbels committed suicide in an underground bunker to avoid being held accountable for their crimes. In the aftermath of the war, the reality of the atrocities committed in the Nazi death camps were made known to the world so that hopefully we can avoid repeating them. Understanding propaganda is the first line of defense against ever again allowing a brutal and hateful dictator to commit such horrible crimes. It may have been easier to control the message in the 1930s, but the internet age presents its own challenges when it comes to fake news, disinformation, and propaganda. According to Simon Fraser University in Canada, there are some simple steps we can all take to spot propaganda and avoid falling victim to it. In the immediate aftermath of a big news event, the news outlets will always get it wrong. Wait for more information. Don't trust anonymous sources or sources that only cite other news outlets, and take the time to compare multiple sources. Pay close attention to the language used by media outlets. For example, the phrase "we are getting reports" could mean anything at all. And finally, some of this is on us. Beware of reflexive sharing. Don't share sensational news on social media based on your first reaction. Do your due diligence before hitting that share button. Following these steps can help to ensure that nothing like Hitler's propaganda machine can be allowed to manufacture outrage, sow hatred, and incite violence ever again. If you thought this video was fascinating and horrifying, just wait until you see our other videos, like this video called World War II Nazi Breeding Plan. Or maybe this other video is for you. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.
So think about it. The Nazis spread the propaganda after the people lost the war because the price of bread went up $700. So what spread faster? The virus or the propaganda of the virus? Because in a minute, food's gonna go up, everything's gone up, and the morale is low. And that's what they're trying to do to the people. So get your spirits up, get your high hopes up. This is a good time for us to start building, start thinking about nation. Standing back and start observing, because the propaganda machine is in full effect. It's your boy Matt Mizzle. You know my slogan: keep it real in the physio. Fuck how they physio. I'm out. Peace.